Wanted to welcome everybody here. I'm Safi Ferris with Cloud Radio, and we also have Ricky Cecchini, who's our VP of Product, who's a little under the weather, but he always delivers.
Mhm.
And it'll be a nice chat for us today, but we're going to basically cover this will be a little bit different format, so not a lot of demoing, more discussion on if your MSP is really ready for chat. He's going to kind of give you the ROI of chat and how to really deliver it properly so that it doesn't stress your workload. So without further ado, Ricky, take it away.
Thank you. A little bit of context because I got some stuff to show you guys. Yeah, like Safi said, this is not a webinar specifically for a demo of Cloud Radial Chat. There's a video I'll reference where you can see stuff of that nature. You can understand what chat does. But I really wanted to focus on and why this is titled the way it is because we get a lot of questions from MSPs, prospective customers, existing clients, everything in between of just like, what's your take on chat? Now, Cloud Radio has a chat product, right? I'm going to flip to this. Again, this is a mixed webinar, so there may be some people who are just now looking at Cloud Radio, some people who are our clients. If you're new, if you've never heard of us, we are a platform. We primarily work with our CSA, which is our client portal. We do have a dedicated standalone chat solution. And specifically, we're here to just talk about really how Cloud Radio can empower MSPs. We basically help you supercharge your strategy, make a really nice experience for your clients with the portal, supercharge your service desk with really good stuff like client forms, information for clients like documentation and courses, and even stuff that's further down the let's call it the chain of command there to like QBRs and more reporting. So kind of tying it all together. But again, today's webinar is not about Cloud Radial's portal. It's not even really about Cloud Radial Chat. It's again specifically is Cloud Radial Chat's always worth it, but is regular chat worth it? And how do we kind of measure that? So specifically, we're looking at what's the demand, aka some chat stats, right? Are you set up to manage it? What does that look like for your customers? What does it look like to measure it? And even like some billing strategies to pay for it. And again, we get this question a lot because as a client portal, it's a natural tack on that happens all the time saying, hey, I'm engaging with my clients. And usually it comes down to ticketing support, right? Because we have a lot of people that use a client portal, whether you're using Cloud Radio today or not. And you're ultimately, from the service desk perspective of the MSP, you would like clients to submit stuff through chat in theory, because in theory, that's a quick way. It's another medium to allow users to submit stuff. But again, does that actually scale? Is it realistic? What does it take for you to be at the level where chat is viable? And what are some pitfalls? So we're going to cover all that. Again, I'll show you where to get some more information, but I'm hoping that you guys can walk away from this with a relatively objective thing. I'm taking off my vendor hat for this one, and I'm putting on I'm a bean counter that works for you. So let's see if this stuff, if the maths, right? So let's look at some chat stats to even start it off. And I should say, if you have any questions and stuff, feel free to drop them in the Q&A is preferred. You can do it in the chat too, although we might have to scroll to find it. I think we have a Q&A set up, maybe.
Yeah, I think the Q&A is there. Just make sure to put it there because I have to keep track of this.
Okay.
So.
If you can't find it, do chat and then ask for.
We could all say hello to Matthew Fitzpatrick's meeting agent. He just joined the meeting.
Oh, hey, what's up, meeting agent?
Hey, hey, meeting agent.
Okay, let's look at some
We've all
chats.
gotten so spoiled with our
I know.
agents.
They record everything for you, which, by the way, again, this is recorded. So if you're signed up, if you're not here or you want to ask questions later, no big deal. We can always go back and ask stuff. We are pretty open in our communications. Okay, so looking at some high level stuff, this is some stuff that you've probably felt, but I wanted to especially cite the more important stats. The chat-based support requests increasing by 80% in 2020 was basically a rise in COVID. And now that's a house stat. So you notice that there's no attribution. What we're seeing there is we're seeing people when they initially were kind of deposed off of COVID, moved away, they had to work from home. Uh, the incidence of in-person obviously fell off a cliff, and then you started getting really, really hyper focused on your email and phone, and then chat was just getting to a point where chat support was viable, so that really increased. So there is a pretty sharp demand up for it as a channel. Now, the rest of these stats are cited and sourced, and there's some studies that go with them, but I just took the prime stuff here, which is 41% of clients prefer that real-time chat support. It's not super surprising because we're going to talk about it. Chat is supposed to be, right? It's perceived as synonymous with faster support than an email, about equivalent to a phone call. So in theory, it's really, really good. And you can see that those that, I don't know any MSP that accepts tickets through tweets, but if you do, there's 3% demand for that. So good luck if you want to chase that. Um, Second point, right? A lot of people are, at best, they are very, very busy and they prefer to communicate on their own terms, and they want to be able to review the conversation, be mindful of their words or whatever. So a lot of people are more comfortable typing their stuff out. A lot of us, even in our own industry, are doing that versus email versus support, where you can correct yourself instantly, where you can clarify. So chat's a more comfortable experience. At worst, it's good for the antisocial people that are just like, I'm not talking to someone. Again, from an average day-to-day person's perspective, the reason this is so popular and getting more and more popular is because this is a not an industry thing, not just necessarily with support, right? I had to pour through these references and make sure that these were not just website chat, right? Because there's a lot of data out there on like more marketing, more like product support. We're talking about a blend here. We're just saying consumers in general expect it on websites, and they kind of expect it inside of apps, inside of support channels, whether it's chatting with a power company about the bill or on Etsy with a vendor, right? That chat communication is becoming more and more expected as consumer trends change. And as part of that, I have COVID brain fog, forgive me. 66% of customers also want that response instant. And that's going to be a key factor when we talk about the ROI and expectations, primarily though in the CX, which this is the thing that kills most MSPs initiatives. If you've tried it, if you miss a chat by 60 seconds, your chat becomes dead and it becomes worse than if you never had it on at all, right? So there is a very clear demand for chat growing among consumers, again, in every facet, but not the best statistics when it comes to actually being able to deliver that. Again, additional benefits. Obviously, you have scalable real-time customer support because it's back and forth, right? Amazing. So the other benefit is it's flexible. We're really big on this as a portal, but obviously, like it applies to a lot of things, which is when you are able to take a client and support them where they are and not pull them out of their day to day, not only does the usage of whatever you're talking about, again, it works for us as a portal, it works for chat as chat. So that's why I say whether it's on your teams, whether it's on the web page, just integrating their intent with your availability is the key to spiking stuff up really good. So that's important. And then the other thing, obviously, is like when it comes to chat, there's a big delineation here to get the benefits. And again, you're going to see when I do the actual ROI numbers on this stuff, it makes a massive difference whether the chat is a chat or whether the chat is a PSA connected tool. So a lot of this supposing here, whether it's on the time to resolution or the faster submissions, is predicated on the fact that you can do stuff like PSA integration, lookups, verification of the end user, stuff that ordinarily kills the chat experience when a user opens up a chat, say on your website, and they have to retype in their email and name and stuff. Like the faster you can get to know that client, that user, the better it is, right? Again, further benefits. Obviously, if you can get chat down, the theory is that you can have an agent driving multiple requests at once, which means that you can obviously two-time tickets, especially really simple ones. Capturing relevant data is really nice because if you have a smarter chat agent, that chat agent in theory can go and get uh, information on that user, right? Anything from the serial of the computer to additional information about their environment, right? The theory of chat can be really, really, really awesome. Again, for the sake of this webinar, I am but a humble bean counter. So I'm going to go as pessimistic and conservative as possible because we want to look at if that's actually viable. Again, end users uploading screenshots and transcript or whatever, that's more managerial things, but that does matter, right? Chat has ramifications not just for obviously the ROI of customer experience, longer retentions, right? Better triage times and whatnot for you guys, but also better training, right? So the theory is also that if you can standardize the way that you respond to stuff, you can capture it easier. You can also respond easier at scale. It's kind of a different theory, but we see that all the time again as a client portal with our forms. forms as a concept, all that you're saying with a form is you're standardizing data. Chat can standardize data. You should be able to get, in theory, the same benefits. So chat's benefits are pretty clear. I don't think you're going to find anybody disagreeing with the benefits of chat. The bummer is how easily can you actually get them, right? And that's what this webinar is really about. Are you ready for it? Because the good stuff's out there. How does that look like? So when we look at if you can handle chat, we're going to look at a couple different facets of whether you're able to do it. So what I said before, half of customers, I honestly believe this in my gut, this is wrong, but I'll still cite it because I cited it for the national study. I think more than half of customers would say that a long wait time kills the chat experience, right? Because again, the chat, the concept of even the word is a back and forth chat like we're doing. If you have to wait for a chat, it becomes an email, right? It's just a quick message, but it's not a chat because you're not chatting, right? So that's a super important thing to consider. Pausing there for a moment, and we'll talk about staffing here in just a second. You can see my points coming up. That's the number one reason that we see our own customers fail with chat because they picked up something. And this was true years ago because Cloud Radio didn't originally have chat. So I worked even 6 years ago, I worked with some MSPs that were pulling not MSP specific chat solutions. We're talking about generalized ones for the general market. And the common issues that came up were obviously having to re-identify the user was a frustrating user experience, took way longer than you would expect. So then you have authentication in front of it. Even if they figured out how to authenticate the user, if you're not staffed properly for it, then what happens is the chat comes through, it's available, it works, it authenticates the user, but then no one's on the receiving end, or the guy on the receiving end went to go get lunch and there's only one of him, or something happened, he sneezed for a second, went to go blow his nose, and 15 seconds elapsed, the chat fell through, pissed off customer, even though it's been 40 seconds since the chat was open, right? So when we talk about traditional chat, we're talking about for staffing considerations, a couple of key things. Number one is SLAs. So we're going to start not at the necessarily just fielding chats, pretending like you have it. How would that even fit within your current SLAs with the customer? Does it already have verbiage and specific tactics for that SLA, right? Because we have response times, which a lot of MSPs put in their SLAs, are no longer really good enough to cut it, right? So again, we see this happening today even without chat in a portal, right? What is the SLA on an email, versus a chat versus a form submission that has all the details, right? So does your SLA need modification before you even consider this? And I'll tell you right now, the answer is probably yeah, right? Because you want to make sure that people can't burn you saying that, it's supposed to be answered within whatever amount, you missed a chat, then all of a sudden there's contract stuff. So legal stuff first out of the way, defining almost SLAs by channel. This is something we see for adoption in our own cases where people want to be able to say, yes, if you submit a ticket through a form, again, we're going to talk about ROI, so we're going to talk about incentivizing chats. A really good way is to say you have tighter SLAs on a chat if you kind of do it through these named mechanisms. And let's call it a looser SLA through stuff like phone calls and emails, because again, those are harder to keep track of. So number one. Number two, the staffing for chat, right? I did this to be dramatic because this is what it takes to staff chat in more of like an e-commerce platform. Although to give you an idea, this is the formula that people use. You do a peak chat divided by 5, right? Because you typically want 5 chats per agent. Now, again, that's more e-commerce. I'm aware that it's not super, super relevant to the IT needs, but that gives you an idea of how much you need to staff. Doesn't take into account any assistance. It's just saying that like if you're getting bombarded by chat, then you have a company or multiple clients with a ton of tickets that are very, very noisy, just going into chat and offering in front of them will drown a team potentially, right? Especially if you have a very scalable team today that workflows work. So keep in mind that if you're expecting, I don't know, even just two, right? Two companies doing 10 chats, and then two of your agents are doing 5 each, which is a lot. That's really aggressive. That already means you need 2 people just monitoring chat. And I didn't put this in the presentation because I didn't really have hard stats to back it up, and I wanted to keep this pretty scientific. But I'll tell you anecdotally that every technician I've worked with loathes chat. And you can tell me if you guys see otherwise, but nobody likes fielding that chat window on the other side if they can help it, because technicians are typically busy investigating and resolving whatever, and they're not trained necessarily to do the customer discussions, right? The customer back and forth, whatever. Handling a ticket via email and posting discoveries is not necessarily the same skill set as going back and forth with like a client, right? That might be more into the account management, customer support. customer service really realm. And then also the third one that gets clients a lot, clients being our clients, partners, MSPs, IT service providers, is what's the plan? Because chat sets up a nasty precedent for 24/7 support. It might not necessarily mean you staff at 24/7, but what are you going to do? You're going to hide the button when you're not in business hours. There are plenty of chat tools that can do this. Don't get me wrong. They either hide it, they say agents are not available. This is where I'm going to try to stay away from our favorite phrase in the industry or every industry ever, which is AI. We're not talking about AI today. We're talking about chat as is. Now, there are ramifications. We'll talk about a little bit of it, but for the most part, 24/7 chat solutions or the expectation of it means that if you're not there again to field the chat at 7 in the morning to 5 p.m. or whatever your working hours are, poor experience, it all goes out the window. So AI is relevant here in the sense that, like, do you have a fallback plan for that chat expectation if it's not staffed 24/7, right? So how do you kind of deal with that? So these are the things to consider and to keep in mind as a really, really high level. Now, here's the other thing. Like I mentioned before, the skill set of the technician fielding the chat has to be evolved. And I've seen MSPs fail, even though everything else was answered in those previous questions because they didn't do something like this. Again, this is a pretty aggressive, well, actually, it's not aggressive, it's a pretty conservative way to think about chat. Before I go through, and I'm not going to read every single one step by step, this is a generalized training program that one would do if you wanted to implement a general chat. Now, obviously, this is relevant to any chat platform, but this is, again, could be e-commerce, could be support. The reason this is important is because, again, it is a fundamental change in mindset. And when I was discussing this presentation, if you're having trouble kind of visualizing or you think you can skip ahead, it'd be like introducing email support tomorrow when no one's ever heard of email. So it's not as easy as you go, well, they'll email stuff in. You have to figure out, like, again, what is the proper etiquette on a chat versus an email versus in person, right? Again, customer service fundamentals matter now. It's the snappiness and the quickness to get answers back and forth are really important. And again, this is a huge one. The platform familiarity. This is not like Outlook, where chances are you probably have a million things to train. It's harder to train on a smaller platform. So there's also the familiarity in there. Then you get into the stuff that you realistically have to get into, which is, again, step-by-step instructions to scale your own team for chat protocols, right? So we're talking about everything from different SLAs to maybe different macros to different back-end controls. So we're really starting to get into the idea that if you're scaling this up, it's not just chats on, somebody's on the chat, deal with it. To build these dedicated processes around it, I'll give you guys, let's just skip advanced steps, right? 2 to 4 weeks, we're not doing all these optimizations, we're not doing proactive stuff, blah, blah, blah. Probably at a realistic minimum, you're spending anywhere from 4 to maybe even 6 weeks, maybe even more, depending on how complex your chat stuff is, just training people up and getting familiar with it. And that's before you can scale it up and roll it out. So you've got the concept of modifying your own SLAs to understand the chat channel. You've got the customer service technician training. You probably want to pick one or two of your techs to actually field it to start off the pilot program for it. And then you have to go into the consideration of, are your clients even ready for it, right? There's a lot of indicators that say whether a client is ready for chat or not. Let's focus on the positives first. Again, after hour support request is actually a pretty good one, because if those are getting ball dropped, or at least the people are waiting for them a lot, you're getting emails at all odds hours, and it sucks. That's a pretty good idea to standardize it. Again, we see the biggest chat adoption among the younger demographics. So we'll call them 18 to 50 is about the ones that have grown up expecting and evolving with more aggressive technology. Again, they're probably using AI themselves, so they're totally familiar and cool with figuring out chat, and they're okay with it kind of being a work in progress because they know what to expect. Super, super important are these two, right? High volume of simple, repetitive questions. If you're getting the same stuff over and over and over again, chat solutions are designed from the ground up to kind of fix that problem, right? If you're getting hyper complex stuff, we'll talk about it, but that's the one that is a key indicator in your mind. If you see the same ticket come over and over again, which means you could probably analyze that in your own PSA to determine which one of your clients would be a good pilot. And again, existing usage of messaging apps basically means, like, do they already have some familiarity with how chat works as a general use case? Not going to be a problem with most modern organizations. And are they asking for faster times to respond, right? Are they complaining about slower support? So it can be a really good PR move for you as an MSP to say, we're rolling out chat, we're rolling it out to this client, we're testing it out, and we have this kind of preset template to say, does this client kind of fit the bill? The ones that you should really not, first of all, I never recommend anybody bulk rolling out chat to everybody. It's way too overwhelming. Forget your clients for your own team. They're going to really be struggling. But for your clients, if you have people that insist on phone calls, they're not going to be thrilled that you put chat in front of them. I don't care how cool it is. I don't care how AI whimsical, whatever. It requires a shift in mindset, right? And that is inescapable. I have no tricks. I have no cool template to download and no cool email to send out that will change that. It takes time. Especially, again, further points, complex relationship-based discussions. If you have a specific relationship with a client and you know this, it'd be kind of like if I said, hey, we're doing webinars, you can get all these answers with chat. That's not the point, right? Don't lose the forest for the trees. You want to maintain the relationship with the clients that are focused on that. Again, heavy compliance-based ones, you start to get into the use cases where if they have specific needs and you don't really know how to approach it, blanket putting a chat solution to them is a cause for disaster. Older demographic, again, it just is a necessary thing to state. People don't like chat. They get frustrated and they can be annoyed by it, and obviously that reflects back on you. And again, if they have told you explicitly that they don't want to do it, you can start to communicate with them saying, here's the benefits, here's the type of chat. But again, that's not one where you would rug pull them and say, okay, everything's through chat. So very clear delineation. And that will also reinforce, I'll go back a slide, that will also make a lot of this stuff a lot easier because whether it comes from portal, whether it comes from chat, whether it comes from DNS, again, Cloud Radial has started to become, because we're so focused on the client experience across different platforms and different tools, we have a pretty good amount of data on how MSPs bring tools, solutions, and things to market to their clients. So it's kind of as an advisory, the people we talk to say like, yeah, it doesn't matter what piece of software you're doing. If you're collaborating with your clients as an MSP, you're going to want to do some version of this, and chat is no different, right? So being able to pick a couple guinea pig clients, having them be cool, having them be that younger demographic, basically filling out that thing in the green light is going to help you standardize and create that chat framework that you can then apply to kind of pricklier and more difficult clients once you have your formula down. So in short, don't go taking experiments and prototypes to customers that you have tensions with, because chances are you're going to stumble. And again, with your own team, with your externals or clients. But if you can take the ones that are willing, that are younger, that are kind of asking for it and mash it up, then you have a viable use case to even try it, right? So haven't gotten to the hardline ROI numbers on chat yet, but before you even consider looking at a chat solution, make sure you have something in mind here that would fit the bill to see if that's even ready for you. Now, let's switch to a little bit of CX for chat, right? So key pitfalls to avoid at all costs. If you do these, you need to correct immediately. So number one, obviously a poor user experience. I didn't want to put the full details because there's a lot to it. The number, not number one, because I think actually number three in here is number one, but I like to be confusing, and I got that COVID brain I mentioned earlier. I don't know. But number one, poor user experience. What does it really entail? Biggest thing is authentication. Again, that's what we see over and over again. If authentication hits that user, right, especially if they're, I'll be selfish and use Cloud Radial, if they're in a client portal where they have their name at the top right and they're logged in and everything, if they pop open a chat and have to re-log in again, frustration, right? That is a poor user experience, and that's something that delays them from even using the chat. So that's a barrier to entry, no good. Number two is a broken interface. So it doesn't really happen all that much, I'll say. I think a lot of modern solutions have gotten pretty good at this, but when you have chats that need to be reloaded, when you have things that don't exactly frame in properly inside of Windows, if you're trying to do some clever stuff with putting it inside of like a mobile app or something like that, it can work, but again, if it's broken and people have to rotate their phones or they have to change their screen size, right? So it's not necessarily all about responsiveness, but again, even the look of the chat has to look good, or at least decent. And then general incompatibility is the third one, which is for poor user experience. That means that, like, again, where are you expecting them to come in for this chat? Where are you telling them to? So it's a mix of the technical capabilities of the chat, but also how they access the chat. And if you're facilitating those channels, and if you're allowing them and you're saying, yes, this is the way we intend you to use chat, especially because you control it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're providing the support experience. Number two is why this is not necessarily about AI, because it can be a good thing or a bad thing. In this case, in this specific example, I'm talking about human beings, no AI at all. When you have a chat, the expectation is that I am getting basically an instant ticket, instant support, instant email. It's okay to have a macro, right? Have something that is standard that you can do, hi, welcome, what's your issue? Nobody has beef with that. The beef is when someone hits you with something very dramatic, saying this is a complete work outage, and you hit them back with something like, I understand, smiley face, I'll be right there. I get why why it's super tempting, but having too canned of a response makes people either think you're a robot or think that you're not taking them seriously, empathetic. So in either case, it's a very fine line, and I wish I had more hardline stats to share, but canned responses are a big killer of chat frequency. So you might see that if you did everything properly, but you give bad responses, people don't work with a chat because it feels like it's just thrown to the wolves. It's just like a generic, like, yep, got it, your request is logged. So that's kind of back to that technician training. If you're going to be handling live chats, having a process and having kind of a framework, but keeping it flexible enough to know they're working with users is super important. And this is the third one because this is just sheer logistics. So availability mismatches is what I was talking about with that 24/7 support. So technician goes up, you have one pilot technician on your side handling client chats. He gets up, he goes to the bathroom, he misses a chat, right? Support's not online. Again, the unfortunate shackle that chat offers from a perception standpoint is that it's available all the time. So support not online, it takes one of those to make a client basically go like, well, I'm not going to know when it's available, so I'm not going to use it because email and phone call I can keep calling and they'll pick up, right? Email, I'll send it and I'll forget it. Chat is so fickle in that sense that it has to be watched very, very carefully. So to remediate against that and make it a super clear client experience, having the chat state the working hours, being able to staff those working hours, being able to reinforce it, and again, not overloading your agents is how you fix number three, right? Making sure that you have super clear definitions, especially even in the SLA, when you're available and when the chat actually works. So all in all, these are the kind of key things to keep in mind from your side to make sure that the customer experience doesn't fall into this. And let's get into some numbers because I think numbers kind of are interesting and it's even worth saying like, hey, is this thing going to be financially worth it? Which is the number one concern, I think, for any business owner or person in general. Why bother with this? If I answered yes, I think I can do it all. So here is a general flow, right? And I use Cloud Radial Chat because we verified this. This isn't some, I think, or whatever. This is literally how it works. Before we look at it, and I'll talk through it, the specifics here are to get these numbers, you have to be PSA connected, right? So that means that the chat has to be able to send stuff to the PSA in some form or fashion, right? It also assumes that there's auto verification. And it also assumes that auto verification, meaning that the user can instantly authenticate. And it also assumes that you are able to field this chat in like a familiar format. So Cloud Radial Chat, I can cop out and say it works because the technicians field the chats inside of Teams, and the amount of times we've run into MSPs that don't know how to use Teams are basically none. So that's a lower barrier to entry. Now, if you give me those, let's look at traditional support. So super simple. Again, I know everybody deals with this. A user submits a ticket through a let's call it non-sanctioned, I'll air quote that, channel, phone, or email. Cool. Obviously, they're going to wait for a response. Let's say they miss the phone call, right? Or even if they take the phone call, they're going to have to type it in. So the help desk picks up the ticket in some form or fashion. I'm, again, being conservative to our own numbers, and I'm being super, super liberal to how this is happening. So we're saying they pick up the ticket, they do the back and forth. Significant time elapses means that I can't tell you scientifically how long it takes for the client to respond back, right? You know that sometimes they might pick up the phone or send you an email with everything they need, perfect summarization of the issue, and sometimes it's like pulling teeth, right? Because they're going back and forth. Even when the technician has all the stuff, they may have created the ticket already and will be adding to it, or they may be waiting for all the information to be gathered to get it. Then they have to take it, manually log it in the PSA, and obviously that introduces another thing where it's like certain AI assistants and whatnot have gotten better, but that's still prone to human error, and every time you make a human error, it takes time. And on average, we're seeing numbers that saying that a typical flow of that is about 21 minutes to triage it, right? To say like, what is this? What's the information? Whatever. Again, it could take days if they're giving you crappy information, but we're not going to assume that. So we know there's delays. We definitely know there's manual steps that are prone to human errors, and there is manual entry, which slows people down. Now, says Cloud Radio Chat, but really just think of it as PSA connected chat. So you submit a ticket through chat, obviously real-time interaction. You still have to pick up the ticket, right? If we're talking about live, somebody fields the ticket. Because they can ask the questions right there and then they say, got it, they can log it from the chat to the PSA, which means that they skip the whole thing of having to copy, paste, grab information, whatever. They just say, take this chat, give the relevant details, let's get it in there. About 40% time savings there. So we went from 21 to 13. Oops, I'm freaking out because I hit the mouse wheel. Sorry, everybody. And then, when I say enhanced resolution, it means that you have additional stuff that can be built on later. Again, I'm not going to use the power AI word, but we'll come back to that. But when you start getting into building the cases, being able to take those chat transcript, there's some interesting things you can do with from a learning model perspective. But the gist is the time savings on an average ticket are about 40% reliably. So it's a pretty sweet number, but then you have to start looking at that with, well, how many chats can you actually convert, right? We have the same exact question come up all the time. People talk about portals. We're in the business of a client portal ourselves, right? Our CSA is. So when people ask us to do this kind of math too, it's like, well, I can show you why submitting a form through a portal would be faster. Now the question is, how many people can you get or can we get together to submit tickets through a portal? Same question here. How many people can actually submit a chat-based ticket? So here's the math that I worked on as a generalism, right? You can scale this up, the ratio is there. So let's say you're dealing with 10 tech staff, right? And you can raise this up. Originally, we had this math done for like 30, but then I just brought it down to a smaller average, right? Maybe 5 to 10 techs total. Say you're working them 80 hours because we're doing 8 hours per person times 10, cool. 25 bucks per person, all right, 60 daily tickets. On average, we're taking that 22 minute number. So we're doing 22 hours because we're doing our uh, what is it? Our 22 60 tickets, 22 minutes, 13, 13, 22. Okay, cool. About that much on triage alone. We're not talking about resolution because obviously issues can be complex. So specifically, it's about 500 bucks of triage a day, assuming a 10-person team doing 80 hours of work a day. Not a huge amount, not nothing, right? That's a pretty good amount of billable time. So the long gist here is if you can aim for, because we get this question a lot too, is like, what should I be aiming for? Like, you're not going to get 100% chats, nor would you ever want to. That would be insane. So if we can eke out a 20%, right? Just a mere fifth using our same number, we're going for 12 of those chat tickets, lowering down our triage time to 2.64 hours. And again, I'll keep it really high level here so we don't have to look at all this nerd math. But the gist is, if you can do that instead of having this number before, right? 22 hours was the original triage. You get 2.64 on chat. You remain 17.6 hours on phone, email, ticket, right? For a total of 20.24. You're saving about 2 hours. And about 2 hours turns into about 10 hours a week. About 10 hours turns into about 42 hours a month. That's calculated just with working days, right? So I'm not going through and saying every weekend you're getting chats. So 42 hours a month, let's talk about what that looks like, right? So if you have 100% of everything, phone and email, 550. If you can do 80/20, it's 500. So it's about 44 bucks a day, right? Again, I could have been cheeking on 50, but the gist is that like even if you can get what was the total number of tickets? 12 tickets submitted through chat. That's a potential savings of about 11 grand a year, right? Variations of this are super common and very easy for you to plug in. Again, I'm being pessimistic and super conservative. Why? Because this also assumes that everything is fielded manually. It's fielded by your technicians picking up a chat, logging stuff in there. If you go faster, this number goes up. If they are slower, right, like your email and phone call tickets, which they probably are, this number goes up as far as time savings. But I'm trying to say, like, if we're being super drop dead pessimistic about all this stuff, then we're really dealing with about 40 to 50 bucks a day in savings for this volume of tickets, right? So it's not necessarily, this is the reason I pulled all these numbers up is to say that it's not necessarily a bad idea to do chat from a numbers perspective. The stuff that I want to take away from this specific webinar is that financially, if you just look at numbers, I don't really have a lot of MSPs that come back and say pricing for chat, any chat is ridiculous. The real issue is all the other stuff we talked about before, which is who is the client? Who's going to field it? How are we going to train them? All that other stuff. That stuff is very difficult for me as a vendor to calculate because I would have to ask you, How long does it take to train? What is the familiarity? There's a lot of variance there. So when we talk about both how to justify the ROI and also there's a question of how do we bill clients for this? It's tricky, right? Because you look at these numbers and you start to say, like, well, if I want to bill a client for it, one of the biggest problems of chat is that it's inherently assumed to be free, right? Because it's not like you make people pay for phone calls or make people pay for emails. If you do, please let me know how you do that. But for the most part, people expect it to be a free channel. So the majority of MSPs, whether it's right or not, I can't speak to it, but I've seen them eat the training costs because at the end of the day, they're opening up another channel. They're trying to figure out whether that is something that, is viable for them. And as they figure all these things out, like let's say again, we're using my pessimistic calculations here of like $220 a week, right? You're probably going to have to spend a fair bit of time. So $25 an hour was the number we decided was an average the cost per tech. So $25 an hour, let's multiply that by 10 for 250 hours allotted a week for training on chat. You might eat your first week's cost just in training alone for that, right? So there is a nuance here to be completely objective to say, okay, you might recoup these costs in probably the first maybe 2, 3 months is what I'm thinking, probably based off my numbers here. Again, huge variance. This is a lot of fuzzy math, but the idea is that from a numbers perspective, you have to be able to commit to training and commit to everything because billing wise, if you have a good relationship with clients and if you have that red light, green light, right, with the clients here, the green light ones can be your guinea pigs and making sure you have everything tightened up. And then when you have a proven step with red light clients that are more difficult, but you have more nuances, more advanced techniques, more advanced routing, that's when you can start getting into stuff like faster SLA, priority stuff. Chat will open it up for you, but you may add additional price for them for chat support per seat on their seat cost, right? But it has to be a proven model. That's the big thing with MSPs is nobody is going to pay a higher seat cost for something experimental, which is why I fully endorse you holding off on the term AI. We're going to talk about AI right now, but AI is one of those things that if you start adding this, it could be a force multiplier because a lot of the stuff we're talking about for clients should be repeatable, right? So when we're talking about your average green client that's really a good fit for chat, when you get those high volume of repetitive questions, when you just need to log stuff, when we're talking about like reset my password, we're talking about my printer's broken, right? Not necessarily we need to look at all our servers and we need to renew our ISP contract or whatever. Chat's not super great for that, right? It's great for the basic support stuff. So if you can get all those squared away and you can reliably roll those out, then you can start actually justifying it with tiered costs. But again, from my own anecdotal data of our own partners, people eat the cost of chat all the time. So be keeping that in mind as you look at these numbers. Whatever chat solution you calculate and you start doing the math on, be aware that you're probably not going to see those returns for a bit until people are trained up and you have a process and then get to it. I'm going to do it's not a demo. Again, I put demo time sort of because it's not really a demo. I just wanted to show you an example of what it looks like in motion so you have an idea. But obviously, I hope people have seen chat before. Zap, any questions or anything I should address before I shift onwards? I think it's pretty quiet.
We had one client who asked for some support information on getting set up, and I put it in the Q&A that basically we have a support article that explains our chat and then also kind of walks them through, getting set up and then how to get a hold of their account manager.
Yeah,
Um, and I know you don't want to get into the cloud radial product,
I
but
will
I'm
though.
sitting here like biting my tongue. One thing that's as I'm sitting here looking at all of Ricky's numbers is that I see um we're looking at just a basic chat solution, and I wouldn't touch anything unless it had the PSA integration. And I'm
Right.
just kind of, bossy pants, the mother hen, but you want the PSA integration. But then the other thing, as I kind of look over this, is it's your customers expect it. This is where they live. They live in teams, they live on Slack, but and it does potentially create a workload, as Ricky has pointed out. But one thing inside of our product is that the engagement with people in chat comes through either Teams or Slack. So the tech is working with your client while the tech is sitting inside of Teams or while the tech is sitting inside of Slack. And what's interesting there is I will tell you from our own experience years ago, I flipped on, remember when I did this, Ricky? I flipped on the HubSpot chat.
We have personal experience with
Yeah, we
this,
have
so
personal experience here, and it just overwhelmed us because we had an inbox, a new inbox we had to have check all the time. And that's one thing that Cloud Radio doesn't have because you're integrating it because of that PSA integration and the Teams and the Slack integration. You're working there. You don't have to go to another inbox to check to see what's going on. And that almost killed us. And
Mhm.
so you have to add another, employee to kind of sit and watch that. And so, we turned it off. And so I think from our own experience, in the MSP space, obviously, you don't want to have to create that ticket. You're going to make mistakes. There's going to be typos. Um, so you have to have that PSA integration, but looking into the Slack and the Teams integration piece, your techs are going to need that and your techs are going to want that because you don't want this to be an additional load for them.
Right.
And I also, Ricky, one thing that I wanted to point out was when you were talking about the authentication. See, we've got
Mhm.
the PSA that we can authenticate off of. We've also can authenticate off their cell phone number, which I
Mhm.
don't remember how that's all done, but I know that we have that authentication. And then if we can't authenticate them, we're still able to pull them in for you to manually. I can't remember how that all works, but we're able to accept them in to create that ticket. So, but
Yeah.
that's just that was my Cloud Radio chat plug. But it's almost to me, I think every MSP should have starter chat. I mean, don't even go into the other pieces. I would do it just so that I could accept a ticket, get it created inside the PSA and have the ability to have that live presence, click over to live to be able to chat with that client, not pushing in the other side. And then the
Yeah.
other thing, and then I'll let Ricky have it back, is that we also have our model is flat fee.
Mhm.
So you're not charged by users. It's just a flat fee. But anyway, so I'm off the Cloud Radio chat. Sorry, Ricky.
Well, no,
Hey,
that's a
Ricky
good
was like,
point.
this isn't about sales, but I'm sitting here going,
I know the
you
product guy
know,
is always like painful when someone's like, "Let me tell you something." I'm like, "I want to talk about the cool stuff, guys. I'm with you."
yeah,
But either way, it's a good point.
sorry, sorry.
I, I also
I
get the
hijacked for just a couple of minutes.
well, it's a good thing you said that because again, why I wrote demo time sort of is obviously I know I'm doing a webinar on chat and I know we sell a chat product. So we did do a deep dive a little bit ago. I think it was 9 months. It's pretty fresh. On Cloud Radio Chats on our YouTube channel. If you literally just type in Cloud Radio Chat, but you don't spell it wrong like me because I'm illiterate, you could probably get to it, right? And this is going to actually be able to show specifically how it works in action, right? So Chris Dix and then Safi was also in this one. We'll go through and actually talk through what the chat looks like from the different various levels. Now, again, I'll spoil it. We do some AI chat stuff too. Again, we don't necessarily have to. So part of the versions of Cloud Radio Chat, like what Safi's talking about with the starter edition, is just the basic PSA connected chat. And I thought it'd be interesting to give you an idea because again, there's a couple vendors out there that do PSA connected chat, but I'll say this. I think that if you're looking at it and you want to consider it seriously, chat for MSPs, the mandatory is exactly what Safi's saying. The mandatory is PSA connected because again, if it makes your technicians, your team have to go to another inbox, another place to work, it's going to be a terrible, like a battle of attrition. And then same thing for your clients, right? So that authentication works on both sides. What Safi said is totally true. Our own team suffered with that because again, nobody wants to be the one that gets stuck with dealing with chats, right? Because then you're literally chained to a computer waiting for someone to ask you stuff. So the idea that at least it's connected to the PSA, at least you can field stuff can be super sweet because worst case scenario, that client basically logs an instant ticket to the PSA and they have verification. You can have workflows off that versus if it's just your traditional chat and they send a chat, it's lost, right? It's something that somebody has to pick up and do something with. So that's really the nature of what we mean by PSA connected. Again, This is not a demo, but I wanted to give you an idea of what it looks like when you actually have a chat thing. So again, we're all familiar with chat widgets, right? Nothing special, too crazy there. But I wanted to show the example of like what it could look like. So imagine you have this chat. Again, I'm obviously going to do it from the perspective of it's embedded in our portal, but it could be on the phone. It could be via text message. It could be.
You're going to end up using it in Teams. I
That's
mean,
the
that's
idea,
where it's going to
honestly.
be, or it's Slack.
Like, I'll use Diane. I always pick random people. I'll use Diane as an example. So if Diane is submitting a ticket, and this is the example, right? Because I remember I mentioned the 13-minute mark is my estimation for a ticket being submitted, right? That 13-minute mark is super important because the ROI calculations that you have to keep in mind are based on how quickly this thing can triage, send with information, because ultimately, your response times will go down, but if your resolution times go down too, then it has additional benefits. Remember, those calculations were just for triage time, not we didn't factor in any resolution. That's where the value of AI, blah, 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 resolution, can it submit the ticket? Can it submit a solve ticket and so on and so forth? Because then you can start adding in additional stuff. So again, if you look at a general vendor's approximation of chat ROI, you're going to get people that are like wild, right? They're going to say stuff like, "Well, you can save $10,000 a day if you just have everybody submitting a chat ticket and it resolves itself." It's like, yeah. And if you could do that, then you could retire tomorrow and fix your marriage and everything would be wonderful. But the reality is, it's not always that way, right? Again, I want to be super realistic. So again, I'll give you an example of one. Diane Mead hits a chat. What happens here? I won't even restart it, right? So you can watch it start to finish. This is what you're looking for if you're shopping around for a chat. You're looking for this, right? I'm already signed in. I've been authenticated. Cool. Found a contact record. That's specifically saying we found it in the PSA. Any PSA connected chat solution should need to do this because they need to match the ID. Now we're getting nerdy. They need to match the ID to the right stuff. So when she submits a ticket, it's her submitting the ticket, right? Okay, so we're going to do a super basic example. I'm reporting an issue. So it's going to go, all right, cool. Now, in this case, this isn't a live chat. I don't have my tricky technician on the side answering, right? So this is a good example of what it might look like for 24/7 support. What I don't have this thing set up for in this webinar is because I didn't field for it, is what it would look like. Side by side, it would look like a technician in Teams getting a Teams message basically saying, hey, someone's on the hook. They click it. When they answer in Teams, it shows up here. So I'm focusing here on the user experience. But if I say like, well, the basic simple stuff that you don't really want to deal with, my monitor keeps flickering, right?
So, Ricky, Matt Thompson asked, can the entire chat interface be handled on the PSA side? So um, can they respond? I guess he's asking inside the PSA without the tech needing to be in Teams or Slack.
I don't think so because we still need a medium to communicate. Like the ones that we support for sure are text and SMS, but like the place that they actually send their responses from and they pick stuff up, our thing was designed to be from Teams or Slack specifically. Like the tech answers from there.
Right,
Even
right.
when it comes to like the deep dive, again, I'm not going to make you watch the video behind my back through a screen share because that's painful. But you can see, I think Chris had an example somewhere over here. Here we go. I think it was like you can get a kind of a still. So like this is an example of like the bot comes in, it sends you a card because somebody initiated a chat, right? Here we go. It's like, do you want to pick up that chat, right? He's missing this option, but a typical Teams thing would be like, okay, pick up the chat. They just said this. Do you want to view the ticket, whatever? And that's hooked up to the PSA. But I'm going to say no because it's specifically designed for them to work out of those two instant chat things without having to tack on that extra inbox. That's
Right.
my take.
But then the history, is recorded and kept, the
It
transcript of
is.
it all. And then also that feeds in for cloud radio partners. It'll feed into their the history of that ticket as well.
And that's it, right? So it's like, again, this is the AI stuff. And I want to show, it's not really, I'm not showing this for AI's sake to go like, oh, look how cool it is that it's answering stuff. I want to show you what saves the time. So again, if I'm a user, I'm Diane. I always do this like a caveman on purpose because I always assume people will beat this like a caveman, right? Meaning that like they're not going to answer anything the AI asks. So it's like the AI is saying like, hey, do this. What is it? What's happening? Is it flickering randomly? Stuff that a technician would ask too. It's like, have you noticed changes? And I'm just going to say, I don't know. I'm an ignorant user. So it's like this thing is going to basically, you're like, can you tell me anything more? Flickering intermittently. This is my cool way of being able to misspell things and also put, see, I put a D, I put the things in the wrong order. Whatever, right? What I'm ultimately baiting this thing is to try to get it to submit a ticket. So I said, I don't know. Again, I'm giving it basically nothing. That's fine. What I want it to do now is to say, so now it's done with me, right? You can limit the number of responses it does back and forth with AI, but specifically now it's like, all right, ticket created. I'm not trying to frustrate you. I'm not trying to drive you to stop using me. I'm trying to make sure I can get you as fast as possible to the correct source, right? Triage time is the important thing here. So that ticket was created. When we go into, now we're in Cloud Radial, I also have ConnectWise pulled up so you can actually see it there too, but it's the same information. Because that ticket is logged 32895 right here, my monitor keeps flickering, right? PSA connected means that, again, the additional benefit of having the user in the portal means that they can see it too, but it's locked in there. So it's like what the response is going to say is basically like, hey, they're not sure. We need additional information to troubleshoot further, right? So right off the bat, like the technician would get the transcript as well inside of the
Hmm.
PSA. So let's refresh. So it's like we should be able to see that in ConnectWise. It should work the exact same for any PSA because again, more or less it's the same exact stuff. And for the gist of it is that now they have what they need theoretically to go through with it if the user isn't super ignorant. And the other nice thing is in some format like this, right? The two big things that come up is like, can you accomplish this type of flow? Obviously, right? The ticket is submitted, the triage time is reduced because ticket submitted to the appropriate place. In this case, it was just our generic professional services like normal priority, blah, blah, blah board. You can get fancy with Cloud Radial Chat, right? You can have the buttons show up, it's an urgent request and route that appropriately. So it's like all those things are possible. But right now, again, pessimist, conservatism, focused on the lowest case scenario. If I reset the chat, here's another thing that our chat does that I would urge you to think about. If you're doing this chat, right? Remember the webinar title was is your MSP ready for MSP or chat?
Chat.
So you can tell my COVID brain's like real struggling, guys. Sorry. But it's one of the things that people ask for all the time is like, neat. I love seeing a cool chat work. And the ticket was logged amazing. Half of your ROI, if not more, that you want to see is what if the ticket's completely resolved, right? Ideally, right? This is more of an AI conversation, but it does factor in how you look at the ROI of chat because when you look at an AI chat of any type, it could be ours, it could be any other one. Really, it's all the same calculation. You start looking at the idea of like, well, calculating closed chats is much more valuable from an ROI perspective than just a routed thing. So triage time is the first immediate thing that you can look at with anything. Obviously, AI stuff's triage time is going to be way lower than human, but they're both lower than phone and email. Say I do the same exact thing, right? I'm going to do, I want to report an issue and check out what we'll do. I want to do my keyboard button is stuck. Let's just do the A key, even though it's not true. I already used A, but whatever. This thing's dumb. It won't know. And I get psych, it's not stuck. We're good. So what's it going to do? You want to track this because if you're paying for a chat solution and that chat solution is able to triage and resolve stuff for you, right? What's it going to do? Well, we ideally would like it to submit a ticket anyways, because if that ticket submission can happen and it's good to go, then you're going to be able to say like, okay, yes, it's prevented XYZ a number of tickets and stuff. So depending on the nature of it, right? To be able to log this stuff and say, yes, it submitted a ticket. Yes, it closed the ticket. Yes, whatever. I actually did this earlier and you can see that. Oh, I actually deleted the ticket. Oh, well, whatever. You can have the tickets come in with a pre-closed status, which is something that I would think that you would really want to do. Because again, when it comes to ROI reporting, even of our own CSA portal, one of the things people do all the time is say, like, how many things is it closed? Factoring that in again is a factor. So in the grand scheme of things, I'll flip back to this. When you look at an actual ROI cost savings, again, starting with triage, easiest calculation, simplest, there's not really a lot of muddying. When you get to the big, large scale one, you start factoring in triage time, you start factoring in resolution times, right? So you want to be able to connect it to the PSA because the majority of the PSA ROI calculations are going to be driven by the source of that ticket. What I mean by is when you go run a report in your PSA, right? Obviously, you're going to have the source field inside the ticket. In this case, I don't because I'm an animal. But if you have the source, there it is. Source is somewhere in here. I don't use PSAs very often. Sorry, everybody. It's somewhere in there. The source field basically will tell you, is it what channel is it from? Do you have lower resolution? So triage, time calculation, source calculations, are chat source tickets actually faster? Keep an eye on that. And then third and foremost, to really get the supercharges are chat tickets, especially the ones that are handled by AI, any kind of intelligent ticket closed at a higher frequency, because then that also equals instant response time, instant resolutions, much less load on the service desk. So I wish I could tell you that this calculation is a quick formula. I could say throwing it up here. But again, the point of this webinar was to say, here's where to start. So hopefully this is a pretty good idea of whether you should look at it. Again, take a look at all these numbers, try to run it through at a high level and figure out if it's right for you. And again, shameless plug. Well, not even shameless, right? Shameful plug. Sorry.
I was bad. I kind of jumped in.
If you're a Cloud Radio customer wanting to talk about it in general, it's like we know this math, right? We're not shy about it because again, this is the math you should be asking. It's basically saying, is this right for it? Are we at a right stage? Do we have the right clients? Is my team ready for it? Pretty complex matrix. We'll show you what we have to do. Again, we have one of the better chats out there in general. I think even though a lot of the general chats just
Doing lots of improvements coming down the pipe too, which I'm not allowed to talk
I was about to
about.
say, it's like I was given a gag order before this to say,
So I know we're not supposed to, but can we just go like it's exciting? You're gonna love it, those kind of things.
writing, it's built to handle multiple, I can't say
Yeah, yeah.
whatever.
You might be able to do some outbound chatting. I mean, there's
Go
some other couple
bother,
of
go
things we're not
bother the
supposed to talk
salespeople.
about.
They buckle under pressure all the time. Just go bother them and see what's coming up. They'll tell you. But that's the gist, right? So hopefully this helped. Again, if you want to see our stuff specifically, if you're an existing Cloud Radio customer, especially CSA, the portal, and you're wondering how it works, how it can fit in, whatever, you can just reach out to success@cloudradio.com. This one's for a Cloud Radio partner. Specifically, that'll go to your account manager. But
Yeah, and then I also am going to go back is you don't need just if you're interested in chat, just throw in that chat starter. Start there.
yeah, don't
And
same thing for you. Don't go
yeah.
enterprise, don't go planning for customer,
Yeah, don't,
whatever. If
I mean
it's your
that's bad. We'll
first,
probably get in trouble for saying that too, but start in that starter mode and get your feet wet. Start to see what you want it to do, and then you'll be able to train your AI a little bit better with some new things that are coming out with us. And I think that, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised at how I think your ROI numbers are very, very conservative.
they are. They
So,
pretty much are.
but I do think there's a lot of cost savings and so forth. But anyway, just something to consider. But reach out to your account manager. If you're a chat prospect, please understand that you do not need a PSA. I mean, you do not need to have cloud radio.
That's true.
If you're using a PSA and you're a large company, internal IT, you also have the ability to use chat because it does stand alone. But check it out, explore, and we just wish you have a great day. And thanks for attending the webinar.
Thanks,
Thanks.
guys. Appreciate you.